Donald Trump will lie. And we know that he will lie because we know that he will speak. And it is impossible for him to do one without the other.
There's that. Hi again, everybody. It's 5 o'clock in New York. Just 4 hours to go until the first presidential debate of the 2024 presidential election cycle. There's one thing we know for sure, and there's not a lot we know for sure, but there is one thing we know for sure about how tonight will go down. Donald Trump will lie about lots of things. He lies about things big and small. He lied more than 30,000 times during his presidency, including about losing the 2020 election. And he has lied continuously since he left office. Tonight will be no different. But beyond the lies, tonight's debate will be unlike any other, even different than when President Joe Biden and then President Donald Trump faced off in 2020. That is because the current president of the United States will now be on stage debating a man with 34 criminal convictions. A man found liable for sexual assault, a man who, when he didn't win last time, incited a violent and deadly insurrection on our country. Nothing about tonight is normal. As much as there are people who want to put this debate in terms of policy positions or foreign policy agendas that might come up, the contrast is actually a lot simpler. One candidate obeys and reveres the rule of law even when it ensnares his own son. The other loathes it, is running on destroying it. One candidate is trying to protect America's democracy. The other is got it on a website that he's going to dismantle it. One puts the country before himself. The other puts himself before the country and his own supporters. And I don't know if you want to hear this or not, but the polls show the two candidates within striking distance of one another right now, meaning that there's a lot to learn about what the voters actually know about what each man says they're going to do as president. Tonight will be the first time they get to do that. It'll be the first presidential debate to be held in a studio with no live audience since Kennedy debated Nixon in 1960. There'll be a mute button for the moderators to use to minimize the candidates interrupting and speaking over each other. You can guess who that was designed to quiet. It is the earliest general election debate ever to happen in the flow of a general election calendar. Usually they're in the fall. And Politico reports this, quote, the early timing of the debate has the potential to change the trajectory and narrative of the race for weeks or months, especially if tonight's debate turns out to be the only one of the cycle. It's where we start the hour with some of our favorite experts and friends. Chief political columnist, the host of the podcast In Politic for Puck, MSNBC national affairs analyst who kindly and generously anchored this very program on Monday. Thank you, my friend. Don Heilman is back with us at the table, former White House communications director, co-host of MSNBC's How to Win 2024 podcast. Jennifer Palmieri's here, plus Democratic strategist, MSNBC political analyst Basil Smichels here. John Heilman, how are you thinking about tonight first, and then tell me what you're picking up from being in the room?
Well, Nicole, I think it's often the case, happy debate day, by the way, that it's often the case that it's mildly overstated about what you can pick up in the room at this point. The Biden people in particular have been kind of on lockdown for the better part of this day. I mean, they've been out doing a few things here and there, but they're not, they've got their a coterie of people who are going to spin here in this room behind me tonight. They have not yet revealed who all those people are, including to CNN apparently causing some consternation among those people in the television world who'd like to know exactly who the Biden team are going to put out. I think that here are the realities that I think are that we have coming into tonight. One of them is that I think there's a broad consensus on both parties, like smart people in the Republican Party and everyone in the Democratic Party, that the Republicans have done a terrible job. The Trump people have done a terrible job at managing expectations here. It occurred to them belatedly that maybe it wasn't a great idea to do again exactly the same thing that they did before the State of the Union, and basically say, Joe Biden can barely keep from dribbling on his shirt or remain upright for the entire evening. That's going to be that's what we think we're going to get from him on Thursday night. That was making it easy for Joe Biden to exceed expectations. That kind of occurred to those Republicans and the Trump's people about halfway through the week. I think that what you see here is a high degree of a sense of the stakes of this debate on both sides, because there is a perception that maybe this will be the only one, because of the new different rules. because it's happening so early. I think that the likelihood that for the small slice of persuadable voters out there, that something's going to happen tonight that changes that is decisive for them, that then holds between now and November 5th is vanishingly unlikely, vanishingly small. But it definitely gives the Biden team particularly a chance to reframe the race and sort of say the general election is now on. These are the terms we're fighting on.
And John, it seems to be Trump's read that the conviction has done some political damage among independents. And Trump, for all of his many blind spots on policy, on truth, on reality, does understand that he can't be elected president without some support from independent voters. Do you sense that there's a strategy to deal with his criminal conviction other than blaming Joe Biden?
No, I don't think there's a strategy other than doing what he's done all along. I would say, Nicole, that I think everyone acknowledges that there's been some damage done by the convictions. I think the crucial thing about which there's debate is how much. And, as I say all the time to the point of tedium, in a margin of error race, the race is going to be won or lost on the margins. And so any amount matters. But I think in Trump's mind and the Trump people, they still look at the battleground state polling. They still think they're ahead in all of the battleground states. There's evidence to suggest that they're probably maybe not quite right, that they're as ahead as they think they are in all of those places. But I think that there is not a lot of dispute about the notion that Trump comes into this race in a margin of error race. He comes in just slightly ahead in the states that matter. And so he feels like I said this on the show before, he feels like he's winning. And he thinks he can come in here and just beat the hell out of Joe Biden. I don't think that's necessarily going to prove to be a great strategy. Nor do I think it's proved to be a great strategy so far in terms of expectations, as I said before. And I think Joe Biden is likely to overperform tonight without predicting, just because expectations have been that so low. But I don't think I've heard anything that suggests on background, off the record, on the record, anywhere, that they have a real strategy, the Trump people, to mitigate the damage that, whatever that damage is, the damage they've suffered because of these convictions. And I don't think they have a strategy for dealing with the sentencing either next week.
We learned, Jen, from Von Hilliard that Melania hasn't been spotted yet. Trump is running on the facts of the two federal cases, right? He's running on Mar-a-Lago. When you're president, they let you do it. PRA, which is a meaningless blurting out of the Presidential Records Act, which is a defense of nothing. And on the insurrection, he's running on pardoning the insurrectionists themselves, his own supporters who beat cops with flagpoles and other weapons. He's not running on the facts of the New York criminal case for which he was convicted by a jury of his peer. And we don't know. Melania may show up at the last minute. But what about just the things that everyone can see with their own eyes?
Yeah, you mean that like what he was actually convicted of, that it was about him having an extramarital affair.
Something about a porn star, something about cheating, something about Access Hollywood.
Which is why I have always thought that it is, and when you look at the polling, people thought it was a fair trial. Now that the crime was about the business records, it wasn't about the affair. But I do think it's certainly unappealing. It's unappealing to the kind of Haley voters, the independent voters, the people that they just don't like this kind of behavior from their president. Plus, when you're not adhering, and I think that the most effective argument the Biden team has used to date on the felony conviction is to say he will not accept Democratic outcomes. He is an autocrat. He will not accept. This is a fair trial. He will not accept that outcome. He would not accept the outcome of the 2020 election. He did not even accept the outcome of the Iowa caucuses back in 2016.
Yeah, he didn't accept the outcome of the 2016 election. He got that guy from Kansas to go look for voter fraud. I mean, he doesn't accept the results when he wins, doesn't accept the results when he loses.
And if it's so if you don't really care, if you think that the trial wasn't fair or you don't care about the underlying charge, still, it's another example that I think is really damning for these, again, like the Haley people, independent voters that are worried about the Democratic North being held up.
And what is the role of the moderators tonight, Basil?
No, the role of the moderator is supposed to be to keep everybody honest, and that's what that mute button is for. But, I'd like to see them try to hold them accountable in real time, and not just with a mute button. To be able to really steer the course and get some good sort of language and dialogue out about what this country is really experiencing and how voters are really feeling, and try to get the candidates to actually talk to them that. I'm confident Joe Biden can do that. But, Donald Trump, and you talked about it earlier, he's going to lie, because that's what he does. But the one thing he can't do is walk around the stage and loom over Joe Biden like he did Hillary Clinton in 2016. So what does he have at his disposal to try to show this kind of sort of toxic masculinity and power and dominance? It'll be to overwhelm both Joe Biden and the moderators. They just got to hold firm and not give in to that, because in truth, if he tries that and the moderators push that back, he will end up doing exactly what Joe Biden needs him to do. Here's the bully. Here's the guy that knows how to run government.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.